The evolution to a camera was pretty specific. Uh, my parents bought me a Nikon F4 when I was in college, but we had gone on a trip to Europe when I think I was 13, and I had a twin lens reflex. Uh, my dad, I think, was interested in photography. There would always be pictures of the family, and he was never in them. So I presume he was the one taking them, and a lot of really bad 8 millimeter film as well. But I did the classic portrait of my father holding up the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which was a um, early discovery for me about perspective, point of view. But I ended up studying printmaking uh, on my way to Georgetown Law School, and decided I couldn't be a law student. Made a U-turn, hid out for 2 weeks. This was during the Vietnam War. And then when my numbers came up right, I, by evolution, went to the University of Florida, and I studied printmaking. And I was working with Todd Walker, who is a Hollywood commercial photographer, did a lot of studio work. His work was interested, but he was leaving photography and going into printmaking. And I was doing traditional printmaking, but it was slow and arduous. I got more involved in doing photo printmaking, which was much more immediate. And I could realize ideas much more quickly than making love to a copper plate and proofing it, and just seeming like an endless, laborious process. I switched over to photography and fell in love. And I pretty much have been doing it ever since, but I also think that I left photography behind a little bit. I was known as a competent photographer. Um, uh, Kathy Ryan at the New York Times Magazine said, you'd be a great editorial photographer if you paid more attention to it. Julie Saul said you'd be a great fine art photographer if you paid more attention to it. I was teaching, I was doing other things, I was doing anything I wanted, and the camera was my vehicle, and I didn't want to be pigeonholed. So it ended up that I always had a camera with me. I would always do assignment work, editorial work for anybody. I would describe myself as a total whore with a camera. You paid me something, I would go there and I would photograph it for you. But as well as being all over the planet, I would take 3 or 4 or 5 or a week extra. I would take one of my kids as my assistant, and I would do the work that I was passionate about. And the work evolved into being less about the technique of photography and more about the subject and the material that I was photographing. And almost anthropology, almost going back to the law and politics and that investigation. I presume that unless you're a commercial product photographer, that has a really distinct label and specialty, I represent everybody with a camera. And now even more so, people with cell phones, that anybody can take anything at any time. But mine was always these studies that would last a year, 5 years, 7 years, 20 years. And they were really, rather than taking images, they were making pretentiously, I would say, symphonies about different subjects that I really wanted to explore.